Rain lashed against the glass of my front door. Morgan stood shivering on my porch, her expensive coat completely soaked. She clutched a crumpled, water-stained foreclosure notice against her chest, her knuckles turning white. Her mascara ran down her cheeks in dark, pathetic streaks. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking over the roar of the storm. "We need $150,000 just to save the house. You have to help us." I stared at the woman who threw me away 7 years ago. The desperation in her eyes was real. The tremor in her hands was real. But my pity was long dead. "I do not fund strangers." I stepped back, pulled the heavy oak door shut, and slid the deadbolt home. The solid, metallic click echoed perfectly through my warm, quiet hallway. My name is Vanessa. 7 years ago, I was a 22-year-old emergency room nursing resident living in Charlotte, North Carolina. My life ran on a grueling schedule of 12-hour shifts, cold cafeteria coffee, and the constant thrumming adrenaline of keeping trauma patients breathing. I was building a career rooted in grit and reality. My parents, Morgan and Trevor, lived on an entirely different planet. Their universe revolved around the Lake Norman Country Club, extravagant neighborhood galas, and maintaining an immaculate, wealthy, suburban image. They possessed a terrifying obsession with their own reflection in the eyes of their peers. To them, optics mattered more than oxygen. And the shining centerpiece of their perfect family portrait was my adopted sister, Erica. Erica was their golden child, put a living testament to their manufactured savior complex. They wanted the community to applaud them for adopting a child. And Erica quickly learned how to weaponize their need for validation. Her manipulation started small. She would conveniently ruin my favorite clothes right before major events. Or she would stage minor accidents, bursting into tears and claiming I had pushed her, just to watch Trevor rush to her defense. Trevor was a coward. He hated conflict. So he enforced a toxic policy of keeping the peace, which essentially meant I was required to absorb Erica's cruelty in silence. If I defended myself, I was ruining the family image. Morgan would aggressively gaslight me, spinning Erica's malicious actions as the fragile mistakes of a traumatized girl who just needed more love. They demanded I shrink myself so Erica could shine. The simmering toxicity finally boiled over the week. I received a highly prestigious clinical commendation from the hospital board. Morgan and Trevor completely ignored the award, but the neighborhood took notice. During a community dinner, several family friends praised my dedication and work ethic. Erica sat at the table, her jaw tight, her eyes burning with an unhinged, feral jealousy. She could not stand watching someone else receive genuine respect. That night, she decided to burn my life to the ground. Erica climbed into Trevor's luxury sedan parked in the driveway, locked the doors, and slammed her own forearm repeatedly into the heavy wooden edge of the dashboard. She bruised the bone, scraped her skin raw, and then dialed emergency services. She screamed into the phone that I had suffered a psychotic break and was actively beating her to death. The police arrived with their lights flashing, turning our quiet, manicured cul-de-sac into a true crime scene. Morgan and Trevor rushed outside. They did not ask me a single question. They did not look at the utter confusion on my face. Erica sat in the back of an ambulance, weaponizing her tears, threatening to post photographs of her self-inflicted injuries all over social media. Morgan panicked. A public assault scandal would get them exiled from the country club. To control the narrative and protect her pristine social standing, Morgan made a calculated, devastating choice. She preemptively contacted the state hospital board. She spun a fabricated story about me suffering a severe mental breakdown, officially framing me as unstable and dangerous. Her phone call triggered an immediate mandatory suspension of my nursing residency. She sacrificed my entire career, my reputation, and my future, just to keep the neighborhood gossip contained. Trevor grabbed me by the shoulders and physically shoved me out the front door. The Carolina winter rain was freezing, slicing through the thin fabric of my medical scrubs. "You are dead to this family," he shouted, tossing a trash bag containing a few of my clothes onto the wet pavement. He locked the door, leaving me standing in the freezing downpour with no phone, no money, and a destroyed career. I huddled under a shattered bus stop shelter on the edge of the highway, my teeth chattering so hard my jaw ached. I stared at the headlights passing by, fully realizing that the people who were supposed to protect me had just tossed me into traffic. They broke me that night. But standing in the freezing rain, coughing uncontrollably as the cold seeped into my bones, a retired fire chief named Marcus Reynolds pulled his battered truck onto the shoulder. Marcus took one look at my blue lips, opened his passenger door, and blasted the heater. He did not ask for a ridiculous explanation. He just drove me to a diner, ordered me a hot meal, and gave me a safe place to sleep. Marcus became my mentor, my anchor. And the father, Trevor, never had the courage to be. He taught me that blood is a biological accident, but true loyalty is a deliberate choice. 7 years passed. I refused to let their lies define my existence. I moved to the medical district, fought tooth and nail to clear my record, and slowly rebuilt my empire from the ashes. I met Adrienne, a sharp, fiercely protective paramedic who eventually became my husband. Together, we built a beautiful, secure home in the upscale suburb of Weddington. My relentless work ethic propelled me up the administrative ladder. And I eventually earned the title of Director of Patient Operations at the most prestigious private healthcare facility in the state. I was thriving. I was untouchable. While my star was rising, the Hughes family castle was crumbling into dust. Erica's unchecked entitlement finally mutated into financial parasitism. She convinced Trevor to take out a massive $800,000 home equity line of credit on their Lake Norman estate, claiming she needed the capital to launch a luxury lifestyle brand. The business was entirely fake. She legally squandered the cash, funneling it into her own extravagant lifestyle until the money completely evaporated. The banks circled, the estate plunged into pre-foreclosure. Desperate to maintain her wealthy facade, Morgan decided she needed a high-paying executive job, arrogantly banking on her outdated pre-marriage experience as a hospital public relations coordinator. She applied for the open director of patient relations position at the highest-paying private clinic in Charlotte. Morgan submitted her resume, completely blind to the fact that the senior facility director reviewing her application was the daughter she had thrown into the freezing rain 7 years earlier. When her application crossed my desk, I did not react with rage. I reacted with surgical precision. I arranged a meeting at a crowded, upscale coffee shop downtown, texting her from a corporate number. When I walked through the glass doors, Morgan and Trevor were already sitting at a corner table. Trevor looked gaunt, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his thinning frame. Morgan's designer handbag was visibly scuffed, her posture reeking of quiet desperation. When they saw me approach, the color drained from their faces entirely. "Vanessa," Morgan whispered, her voice trembling. What are you doing here? I pulled out a chair and sat down. I am the healthcare director who just rejected your application. I said, my voice completely flat. Panic flared in Morgan's eyes. She immediately defaulted to her old manipulation tactics. Leaning forward and trying to force tears, you have to help us. She pleaded, Erica made a terrible mistake. She lost all our money. The bank is taking the house in 30 days. We are destitute. Vanessa, we are your family. You have to give us $150,000 to stop the foreclosure. I reached into my purse, pulled out a crisp $5 bill, and slid it across the polished wooden table. That covers your coffee. I said, that is the absolute limit of my generosity. Trevor slammed his fist on the table. Have some respect. He has said them, looking around nervously to see if anyone was watching. We are victims here. Your sister destroyed our retirement. I leaned forward, locking eyes with the man who had shoved me into a winter storm. You are not victims. I said, keeping my tone deadly calm. You are criminals. Morgan recoiled as if I had slapped her. What are you talking about? I slid a thick manila folder onto the table. When you applied for an executive position at my facility, you legally signed a mandatory financial background screening waiver. My compliance auditor is incredibly thorough. He noticed a glaring, sloppy paper trail attached to your name. You did not lose that $800,000 in a failed startup. You transferred the entire sum into a Delaware shell company registered under Erica's name. You committed fraudulent conveyance to hide your liquid assets from your creditors, effectively locking yourselves out of your own money while dodging federal taxes. The silence at the table was absolute. The background noise of the coffee shop seemed to vanish. Morgan's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Trevor stared at the folder, his hands shaking violently. I opened the folder and tapped the top document. This is a confirmation receipt from the Internal Revenue Service whistleblower office. I said, I submitted your offshore tax evasion scheme this morning. The federal government is going to seize your house, freeze your accounts, and audit every single transaction you have made for the past decade. Trevor buried his face in his hands, letting out a hollow, defeated groan. Morgan stared at me, her social mask completely shattering, revealing the terrified, empty woman underneath. You destroyed us, she whispered. You destroyed yourselves. I replied, I just handed over the receipts. I stood up, leaving the $5 bill on the table, and walked out into the crisp afternoon air. The weight I had carried for 7 years evaporated instantly. But a narcissist never surrenders quietly. 3 hours later, Erica drove her beaten-up sedan into my quiet Weddington neighborhood. Furious that her parents' bailout had been denied and knowing her shell company was about to be seized, she decided to play her favorite card one last time. She parked in my driveway, repeatedly punched her own steering wheel to fake a massive contusion on her forehead, dialed emergency services, and screamed that I was actively assaulting her on my front lawn. When the patrol cars arrived, sirens wailing, Adrian and I walked calmly onto the porch. Erica pointed a shaking, dramatic finger at me, tears streaming down her face. She attacked me. She sobbed to the lead officer. She is completely psychotic. Adrian stepped off the porch, his posture relaxed and authoritative. Officer, my name is Adrian Reynolds. I have been a state-certified paramedic for 10 years. I strongly suggest you look closely at the laceration pattern on her forehead. The bruising perfectly matches the curvature and the textured synthetic grain of a standard automotive steering wheel. Blunt force trauma from a human fist produces distinct knuckle contusions and localized swelling. Not a uniform. Curved abrasion. The officer frowned, stepping closer to Erica and illuminating her face with his tactical flashlight. Erica froze, her fake tears suddenly drying up as she realized her medical theatrics were being professionally dismantled. I handed the officer my tablet. The screen displayed crisp, high-definition security footage captured 3 minutes earlier. It clearly showed Erica sitting alone in her car in my driveway, slamming her own face into the steering wheel, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror, and dialing her phone. The officer handed the tablet back to me, pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt, and ordered Erica to turn around. She shrieked, kicking and thrashing as he locked her wrists together, informing her she was under arrest for filing a false police report, misusing emergency services, and trespassing. Adrian wrapped his arm around my waist, and we stood on the porch in total silence, watching the cruiser drive away, taking the last remnants of my toxic past with it. The justice was absolute and permanent. 6 months later, the federal court finalized the asset seizure. The Lake Norman estate was auctioned off to pay their massive tax penalties. Morgan and Trevor moved into a tiny, run-down apartment complex on the outskirts of the city, utterly stripped of the country club status they had sacrificed their daughter to protect. Erica was sentenced to a short term in the county jail, followed by 3 years of strict probation, rendering her completely unemployable in any corporate sector. A year after the arrest, Morgan attempted to reach out. She left a voicemail on my old phone number, her voice trembling with manufactured sorrow. She told me she missed her little girl, that she forgave me for being angry, and that a family should always stick together during hard times. She was fishing for a lifeline, still desperately trying to manipulate reality to serve her needs. I listened to the message while sitting in the quiet, sunlit nursery of my home, rubbing my pregnant belly. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering guilt. I pressed the delete button, erased the message, and permanently blocked the number. That hollow echo was the final sound of a ghost I no longer feared. When you survive the deliberate destruction of your character by the people who brought you into the world, you learn a few brutal, undeniable truths about human nature. You learn that toxic enablers will always systematically sacrifice their strongest child to protect their weakest, simply because holding the weak child accountable requires confronting their own massive failures as parents. The first rule of survival is understanding that blood does not make you family. It merely makes you a biological relative. Loyalty, safety, and mutual respect are the true metrics of family. I found my real family in a retired fire chief who bought me a hot meal when I was freezing, and in a paramedic who stood between me and a pathological liar. Do not ever let society guilt you into offering your throat to wolves just because you happen to share their last name. The second rule is realizing that the absolute greatest revenge is an impenetrable boundary. You do not have to sink to their level. You do not have to launch a retaliatory smear campaign. You just have to step completely out of the way and let the crushing weight of their own lies collapse their manufactured reality. Narcissists eventually destroy themselves. They just need you to stick around to serve as collateral damage. When you remove yourself from the blast radius, they detonate alone. The third and final rule is the most important: never negotiate with emotional terrorists. When someone shows you they are willing to destroy your career, your reputation, and your sanity purely for their own convenience, believe them the very first time You cannot heal a person who genuinely enjoys the power they feel when they hurt you. Forgiveness is a beautiful concept, but it is not a requirement for peace. You are allowed to walk away without an apology. And you are allowed to build a magnificent life completely out of their reach. Have you ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to protect you, just to protect yourself? Have you ever had to build your own table because the one you were given was poisoned? Drop your story in the comments below. It is time we stop glorifying toxic loyalty and start celebrating the incredible courage it takes to choose your own peace. Share this video if you are done shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's broken narrative. I am Vanessa, and for the first time in my life, I am completely free. Let us pause right there. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are probably asking yourself, how could a person endure 2 decades of being the family scapegoat before finally being thrown out into the freezing rain? Why do people stay in toxic family dynamics for so long? It is not because Vanessa was weak. And it is certainly not because she was stupid. In psychology, we call this intermittent reinforcement, or the slot machine effect. When you grow up with narcissistic parents, they do not abuse you 100% of the time. If they did, you would simply pack your bags and leave. Instead, they give you tiny, unpredictable crumbs of affection, a rare compliment here, a brief moment of peace there. It keeps you pulling the lever, hoping that this time you will finally hit the jackpot of unconditional love. Vanessa was addicted to the hope that her parents would magically change. It took being literally thrown out into a winter storm for her to realize the game was rigged from the start. Now, let us talk about the absolute masterclass in financial self-defense that Vanessa and Marcus executed to take their power back. Notice how she did not hire a shady private investigator or resort to illegal hacking. She used the audit strategy. Scammers, even if they are your own parents, absolutely hate the fine print. When Morgan applied for that executive job, she arrogantly signed a standard financial compliance waiver. She handed them the keys to her own destruction. Vanessa used the system against them entirely legally. Then, look at how she executed building the case. When Erica showed up throwing a tantrum on the front lawn, Vanessa did not scream, argue, or try to defend herself. She let her paramedic husband dismantle the physical lies with clinical facts. And she let the high-definition security cameras do the talking. She built an undeniable, objective case where emotions were irrelevant. Finally, we have the buyout. Vanessa slid a $5 bill across the table and walked away. She did not negotiate. And she did not try to save them. She invested in her freedom by completely cutting off their supply. She accepted that walking away with nothing but your dignity is the ultimate win. Now, when rain hits the windows of my home, I no longer flinch. It no longer reminds me of the night Trevor threw me into the cold with a trash bag at my feet. It reminds me of how far I walked after that door closed. Morgan, Trevor, and Erica lost the house, the status, and the perfect image they chose over me. But I gained something they never understood. Peace. My life is not built around their approval anymore. It is built around people who show up without conditions. Marcus gave me warmth when my own father gave me abandonment. Adrian gave me safety when my own family gave me lies. And I gave myself the one thing I had begged them for my entire life, permission to matter. Morgan's last voicemail proved she still did not want a daughter. She wanted a rescue plan, so I deleted it. That was not cruelty. That was closure. Blood may explain where you came from, but it does not decide where you stay. Family is not the person who hurts you and demands forgiveness. Family is the person who protects your peace like it is sacred. My name is Vanessa. They threw me away in the rain, so I built a life they can never enter. The hardest truth you will ever have to swallow is that some people are committed to misunderstanding you because their survival depends on it. Your toxic family members do not hate you. They hate that your independence threatens their control. You owe absolutely nothing to people who only view you as a financial resource. So, let me ask you, have you ever had to use the audit strategy on someone you trusted? Have you ever had to walk away from your own blood just to protect your sanity? Share your survival story in the comments below. Hit subscribe for more Street Smart Life strategies. And remember, your peace of mind is the one asset no one is allowed to bankrupt.